Everyone knows that Selmer produced what were widely considered the best saxophones in the world during the 1950s and 60s. The Mark VI and Super Balanced Action, or SBA, horns from that era are still among the most valued and sought-after saxophones on the market. I recently visited my friend John Leadbetter at his saxophone shop, JL Woodwinds in New York City, and asked him to point out the differences between these two iconic and legendary instruments. John is a fantastic repair technician, knows a ton about saxophones, and is a great player, as you can hear.
Okay, so here I'm holding a Selmer Super Balanced Action tenor. Some of the differences between a Mark VI and an SBA start with the neck, actually. The opening aperture of the SBA is slightly larger, I've discovered, from measuring many necks over the years, somewhere around 13 millimeters. And the opening aperture of the Selmer Mark VI is a little less, maybe around 12.6 millimeters. I discovered that generally it's a little more directing of the air at the entrance of the saxophone neck, and the SBA and the Mark VI have a little bit of a different taper through the neck. Also, one of the very obvious differences is the octave key design. With the Selmer Mark VI, you can see that we have this single stamping that was all flat, one flat thick piece of brass, and it was then shaped out and then rolled over into the current shape that you see. And you can see with the Selmer Super Balanced Action, you have multiple pieces. You have like a brass rod stock that is soldered and silver solder brazed at 2 points on either side, and then wrapped around as a loop.
And how do you find the necks played differently?
Yeah, good question. I would say that I find that the Selmer Super Balanced Action necks play a little bit more open and free-blowing than the Selmer Mark VI necks. I find this is only personal, of course. Maybe you find something different on your own experimentation, but I find that the Selmer Mark VI necks are very focused, very direct, but sometimes that's a quite good thing. Think of it like the Selmer SBA fills up the room, and the Mark VI is more of like a directed laser in whatever direction you're pointing the horn. Let's talk a little bit about some of the differences of the Selmer Super Balanced Action octave key. If you can see between these two posts on the Selmer SBA, you have the same kind of rocking mechanism as the Selmer Mark VI, but it's elongated. It's a very long octave mechanism, and it's quite simple, and it functions beautifully, but it seems like Selmer later decided that they could do it better. So they redesigned it for the Mark VI and made some changes. One of the main differences you can see on the SBA, it rocks to the left side. And then if you look at the Selmer Mark VI, and it's to the right side of it. And then when you press G, it oscillates between the two. Still operates the same exact way. Primary, secondary. You can see on the Selmer Super Balanced Action that the front F is kind of a longer arm that extends further over the B, the first finger B. So as you are rolling to it, it's kind of right above you, as you're trying to get to it, and it's a much smaller pearl. You can see this arm is shorter, and it's more of like an over and to the left type motion to get to the front F. Also, look at the diameter of that pearl on the Selmer Mark VI. It's larger. It kind of feels more like a normal key. It's actually the exact same diameter as regular pearls B, C, and G, etc. Let's go on to maybe some side key differences. Now, this is a little bit of a later Mark VI here. We have a 183,000 serial number. This is the ball and socket joint. Every technician, this is the partial bane of their existence is making these quiet. So these happen to be quiet, but they don't always sound like this. Oftentimes there gets to be a lot of gap in these, and it's very hard to reduce that gap. It's a gap that's so small that you really can't put material in there to take up the space. So it just becomes metal on metal, which is a very, very loud noise. And of course the answer is to, possibly grease it or put some kind of compound in there that takes up that space. That's a very temporary fix. There's actually a more semi-permanent fix that exists that is really difficult to do, and it's kind of like this cool, liquid super gluey trick. It's definitely not something to try at home. Don't try it on your Mark 6 because it will drip everywhere. It'll get all over the original.
Wait, you mean don't put super glue on your Mark 6
Don't do it.
side key mechanisms?
Please don't do it. But
Okay, I was just about to go do that.
a skilled technician can do it. What you do is you flow a really liquid super glue into that ball and socket joint along with oil at the same time. So what happens is as that super glue cures, as it cures quite quickly as super glue does, it basically forms a little plastic sheath on the inside of the mechanism, right inside of here, and it takes up that additional gap, and it makes it semi-permanent as a repair, and it doesn't make a lot of clangy noise without just greasing it a bunch. Now let's take a look at the Selmer Super Balance Action. In terms of their side keys, what Selmer was doing at this time was the kind of, I'm not sure how to describe it, but the the kind of hand hooky type cutout.
Claw.
Yeah, the claw. We'll call it the claw in the side keys, and it became very easy for the technician to regulate this in a way that didn't have any gap and didn't make any noise. Like this is also very, very quiet. One of the ways to test if there's any side key motion is to hold down one of your side keys and you gently press it. Don't press it hard, but you very gently touch the key associated with it. And if you see any gap, it shouldn't be there. And actually this is the preferred design, even though Selmer changed it later on the Mark 6s. Generally technicians will agree that this design is better. The very crucial adjustments on the saxophone are mounted here on the F sharp key themselves on the SBA. It's mounted directly to it. It's a 3-piece screw system where you can remove the screw and slide this mechanism along a track, and then you can also adjust the screws bis B flat and G sharp here. So it's a very complex adjustment to get perfect. I've talked about this before in some of my videos, but this is a really crucial one to get the saxophone playing really well. So if you don't really know what you're doing, I would not touch this or adjust it, but there are ways to do it and improve how your saxophone plays. You can see on the Mark 6 that it's not connected directly to that F sharp key cup. Whereas on the SBA it would be soldered right along here, right? And for that reason, because this arm is connected at the back, it gives you a lot more adjustable flexibility of this arm. So when raising or lowering key heights, sometimes it can be very helpful to have this additional arm. So this arm length, it extends all the way back to the back side of the F sharp key where it connects here at the hinge tube. Now, with every pro comes a con, and one of the cons of this is that on the Mark 6, because it's sort of a long arm that's reaching over to adjust these two keys, the bis B flat and the G sharp, it can be a little too flexible. So if something is too flexible, it becomes out of adjustment very quickly. If you're squeezing very hard as a saxophonist, you shouldn't do that, by the way. But if you do happen to, you could in an instant bend that arm up slightly. And think about logically in your mind, what happens if the arm is bent up slightly and then you go to play the next note? It's now literally out of adjustment, and I'll even bend it out of adjustment. You can see, watch with my finger, look how easy it is to bend this arm, right? Yeah. So it is maybe a little more stable on the SBA, right? Because it's soldered right to the top of the key cup, but this has its drawbacks as well, especially when you go to adjust key heights and bring the key heights of the instrument up and down.
That key is so crucial because
there's so many combinations. That's where you start,
That is 100% right.
and then you go from there once you get that perfect.
Yeah, and that's the crucial element, right? So when they're teaching you repair, or you're studying under someone learning repair, the first thing you're going to learn is that the pad needs to seal perfectly individually first before you go regulating it.
Depends on who's teaching you. Right?
Yeah, that's true. I guess that's true. Never mind, I take that back. It should time perfectly, and then you go to adjust these screws to time them with the G sharp and the bis B flat. Another key difference is that non-adjustable thumb hook. The thumb hook is soldered on, soft soldered on to the body tube, and you can't rotate it, you can't move it. You could ask a technician to unsolder it and resolder it in a different spot, that's for sure. But on the Selmer Mark 6, this one is a later one, so it has a plastic thumb hook. The earlier Mark 6s oftentimes have a brass thumb hook in its place, but you can see that there is an adjustment screw. What it does is allows you to remove the thumb rest completely from the body, or you can slightly loosen it and you can rotate the thumb rest, to the right, to the left, up, center, however you prefer it for your thumb and the ergonomics of the instrument. Let's see. Let's talk about some other things.
Anyone that you miss, people are going to cut in the comments.
They're going to destroy me.
Anybody?
They're going to destroy me.
Comments, whichever differences John has missed. Put them in the comments.
Well, tell them I'm sorry. I'm under pressure here, man. Another difference that I've noticed between some Selmer Super Balance actions and some Mark 6s is the bottom bow guard. Actually, it's very smooth and it doesn't have any kind of ornaments on it. It's just a very classic and straightforward, simple key guard. Whereas on some of the later Mark 6s, I have noticed that they kind of changed them a little bit. You can see that the way they stamped it, there's additional lines in this one that it's almost like they've ornamented it a little bit. Maybe they tried to fancy it up a little to make it a little cooler looking. I'm not certain if there was a purpose to it, like a functional purpose. One of the most noticeable ones is the engraving on Selmer Super Balance actions. Now this one is unlacquered. It's possibly a relacquer, or it's been buffed a little bit, but you can still see quite a lot of the engraving in it. You can see how ornamented and beautiful it is. They really had a top-notch engraver at Selmer, especially during this time, early 50s, late 1940s, and just absolutely beautiful engraving. They really took their time. They really tried to make things pop and sort of showcase their instrument, Whereas if you look at Selmer as they progress through the years, this is sort of a more on a later side. This is an American engraved horn, you can tell, but you can see how much less detailed it is. It's a little more simple. It seems like they were trying to make it beautiful, but they were also trying to get through it, So I'm sure that they were producing a lot of horns at this time, and just a little less floral, I would say. The most obvious one that everyone talks about is the separated bell key guards. So you have low B flat and you have low B. They're obviously, they don't even have the third connection post, so that is something to note on the Selmer Super Balance actions. Oftentimes you'll see a third leg on all of them. Like you can see here on the E flat, there's a third brace, and it keeps the key guard from kind of rotating in its position. But you'll often find that someone has actually soldered these screws in so that it doesn't really rotate. That's another pro tip. If you're ever trying to remove these screws from your low bell keys and they do not come out, do not force them. They might be soldered in place. That is a very good way to break the screw off at the head, and then you're really in a heap of trouble at that point. Okay, especially if it's an original lacquer, because then you have to unsolder it, you're gonna make a mess. Now the key guard difference on the Mark 6 in comparison to that, obvious, it's very obvious. It's 3-point. It's like a large 3-point brace where it is a one-piece guard. There's no separation between low B and B flat. I like the visual look of the separated bell key guards. I think it's classic. I think it's aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, you do that on the JL Woodwinds
That's
saxophones.
right. That's on our artist edition tenors. We do the separated bell key guards. It's just something that's a little, adds a little flair to it and kind of brings it back to what Selmer was doing back in the day. On the Selmer super balanced actions, they do have a little bit of a different design on the low pants guard. This basically keeps the clothing out of the mechanism down here, which is crucial. Obviously, you know how important it is to have a saxophone in adjustment. It's very easy for it to go out of adjustment, especially if you're squeezing the keys and you happen to have something caught in there. That's very bad. You don't want to do that. Here is the Selmer Mark 6. This is the classic. They changed this over, and you can see that obviously they have these little kind of designs in it where they cut out portions of the metal. Maybe they were trying to reduce weight. You can also notice that the pants guard is a bit longer. I think that's probably because the adjustment bar is maybe a tad shorter on the SBA. So they made the pants guard slightly shorter on the SBA. So I don't believe that they're perfectly interchangeable. I think the whole placement is a little different.
Okay, well, let's talk about non-visual differences,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
intonation.
Sure. Yeah. Well, everyone's going to have different thoughts and opinions on this. They're going to go absolutely wild in the comments. But the Selmer Mark 6 intonation can be extremely good, and I've also seen some to not have good intonation. It could possibly be due to seal, setup. There's so many varying elements, so it's really hard to compare two saxophones. You'd have to have them both in exactly the same condition to do an accurate and fair comparison. But I find the super balanced action tenors, especially from somewhere around this serial number, excellent intonation, wonderful. Some of my favorite players have played on them. Chris Potter, Seamus, Chris Cheek, etc. have played super balanced action tenors, and they don't seem to have a problem, wrangling the intonation.
And what about ergonomically?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the most notable differences, which I almost forgot to mention, is that in the left-hand table of the Selmer super balanced action, it's quite small and it's quite compact. It's really efficient. So the SBA table is like really small. It's not very elongated. It doesn't have that articulated kind of low B flat key, where the low B flat key is bridged and connected to the C sharp. And I'll show you why Selmer later changed that design and what they were trying to accomplish with it. This is basically a separated key table, whereas when you press down a key, it doesn't pull it doesn't give you a lever connecting. It doesn't tilt that low B flat key toward the low C sharp. What Selmer was trying to do is they were trying to make it more ergonomically efficient. So I would say this is kind of one area where Selmer may have improved things, is that, many times when you're playing in the low register, if you're trying to play anything quick or rapid, you need to be able to get between keys easily. So you can see, because they're separated, and you can see because they have this articulating arm that connects to the low B flat. It's kind of ingenious. You press down C sharp and it slowly pulls B flat toward you. So instead of there being a large gap in between low C sharp and low B flat, you can easily kind of roll to low B flat, and it allows you to roll back. Incidentally, I still do get around fine on the SBA, and I like it just fine like that as well when they're all separated.
And another one, the left-hand thumb.
Oh yeah, the left hand thumb rest. next to the octave key, you can see here that it's real mother of pearl insert, and it's quite small, right? So this is, you know, how they would have done it back in the day, and it's
Right, and it's like convex
yeah,
as well. It's not flat.
Exactly. It is comfortable for some people, and then we have many customers that you
Not
know
for me. I can't do it. I can't do it.
they find it so uncomfortable that we have to either change it, or we create an extension, or we put some sort of plateau on it to cover it up so that it feels flat to their thumb. Because that convex can be quite uncomfortable. And then if you look at the Selmer Mark 6 here, you can see that this, because it's a later one, that they've really replaced it with a flat plastic that is connected to, there's a mounting thing soldered to the body that's made out of brass, and they just kind of slide it in place. So it is quite ergonomic. It feels very comfortable.
A lot of the stuff on the Mark 6s has become standard. Like that's the standard
Absolutely.
now.
Yeah.
And many of these improvements, these small changes like the left-hand pinky table, those just became standard on all modern saxophones.
Totally. Yeah, I would say that in terms of sheer ergonomics, the Mark 6 wins hands down. It's one of the most ergonomic saxophones in existence, and I would say that, you know, I mean, everyone already knows this, but I'll say it anyway, it kind of changed the game for saxophone.